thank you all for coming. I'm Leela Buckjune, and I'm Antoinette Coles, and we're the co-chairs of the DHSPA. We want to thank all of you for coming and for our panel this morning. And we just have a couple reminders for everyone. We have an ongoing fundraiser that we just started, so if you're interested in participating, we would love a contribution of any amount. We will have that ongoing. It's a direct appeal throughout the year. And also, if anyone here is interested at all in getting involved with the DHSPA, we have roles to fill, and we're always looking for extra hands for a wide variety of events and endeavors that we're going to have going on throughout the year. Two other things, upcoming meetings we have. On October 4th, we're going to have the junior, senior parent coffee. That'll be here again, I think, or in the stadium. We'll let you know. Check the calendar in the DPN. And then on Wednesday, October 19th, we will be hosting a virtual college panel at 7 p.m. And that will be representatives from various colleges speaking about their schools, and it'll give you a sense of the college process.
Admissions process,
yes.
Lastly, we have included our budget for this school year in the DPN, and we hope many got a chance to take a look at it. There were copies up at the coffee tables this morning. So we wanted to take a vote to pass our budget for this year.
For the 2022-23 school year. So if everyone's had a chance to look at the budget, Melissa? Oh, okay. Do I have a motion to approve the budget? Melissa. Do I have a second?
Amy.
All in favor? Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And I think we'll turn it over to our panel.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm Megan Emanuelson. I'm the Director of Guidance here at the high school. First of all, a big thank you to the DHSPA for giving us some time and space this morning to share all the wonderful resources that we have at DHS to assist your families and to assist your students. We appreciate the time to share. I'm joined by some of my fantastic colleagues, but I will allow them to introduce themselves. Then the format is we have some prepared questions, just some FAQs that we often get asked, so we can answer those for you, and then we'll leave a little bit of time at the end for Q&A. So, Mr. Ribeiro, can I ask you to introduce yourself? Get us started.
Sure. I'm Paul Ribeiro, one of 3 assistant principals here at the high school.
Good morning, Mark Power, one of the 8 school counselors here at Darien High School.
And I'm Florinda Belmonte. I'm the school psychologist that works with 10th graders, and we have 3 other school psychologists.
I'm Sam Parton, the only school social worker.
Excuse me, Christian Dockham. I'm the science department chair for the middle and high school, and I'm one of 5 of us.
So as you can see, a representative sample of lots of the different resources that we have. So one of the big questions that we get a lot is to explain the difference between my favorite class at school, guidance seminar, and advisory. So Mark, maybe you're the best person to jump in on that?
Sure. So all students have both advisory and guidance seminar. Advisory is basically a group of students, like 10 to 14 students paired up with a faculty member. They meet on a regular basis, usually about every other week, and the time is used to have a discussion about a variety of topics that are developed by the advisory chairs. Topics include things like how to be an effective student, study skills, student wellness. They also use that time to talk about upcoming Darien High School events, as well as they'll use that time to watch Blue Wave News, which is our student-run media channel. Seminar is basically like a guidance class. So all students have seminar in their schedule. You have it based on what grade you're in. So first quarter are seniors, second quarter is our freshmen, third quarter are juniors, and fourth quarter are sophomores. And the topics discussed and covered are based on the grade level, what's appropriate at that time. So right now with our seniors, we're talking about life after high school, and we're also doing some of the college application process. For the freshmen, we'll talk about the transition to Darien High School, as well as just being a student here at DHS and getting involved at DHS. And with the juniors, we talk about post-secondary planning, along with the college search process. And then sophomores, fourth quarter, we'll talk about things like social media, a student's digital footprint, and also do some things like resume writing.
Great, thank you. So when should parents allow students to navigate an academically challenging situation, and when should they intervene?
Thank you, Meg. As a parent of a ninth grader myself, I talked about this with some experience. I find that it's always best to allow the student some space to navigate those challenging situations. I find that teachers react best if a student is proactive and comes and talks to the teacher about what's happening within the class and help develop a plan to address that issue, whether it be behavioral or academic, between the teacher and the student. As a parent, I think the best thing you can do initially is ensure that the student is following through with that interaction. Ask questions about, did you talk to your teacher today? Did you follow up on the plan that you've developed with the teacher? And most times, 90% of the time, it's that support from a parent end that is going to allow the student to develop those self-advocacy skills. And ultimately, we want the student to take care of those issues between the student and the teacher without it having to reach, without it having to reach the level of parental intervention. I think especially for younger students, that may be a difficult first step. So if we think about what you can do to help facilitate that, it may be just a phone call to the teacher to say, hey, my student is having a bit of an issue. Do you mind talking to the student, or can we set up a time so that we can talk as a team to make sure that the student is understanding of what the situation is and that we're all on the same page on how best to support that student through whatever concern may be initiating the conversation to begin with.
Great.
I would say too, I would just add to that, a strategy that parents have used in the years I've been here is that their student will email the teacher about scheduling a time or about a concern or things like that, but they'll CC the parent on it so that the parent is aware that the communication actually happened. So that's another strategy that I found to be effective.
So when it is time to intervene, who should they call?
I guess it depends on what is the problem or what's required. I always feel like if it's a problem in the classroom, always talk to the teacher first. I think that's the best type of communication. Oftentimes, there might be a misunderstanding or a misstatement from the story that's relayed back to a parent from a student. So I feel like sometimes talking directly to that teacher is the first line of defense, and that's always a good course of action. I think another one is your child's school counselor. Every child has a school counselor for all 4 years. I always feel like when I was upstairs in that department, I always looked at us as the first line of defense with just about anything. If you are not sure where to go, start with guidance, and if they can't help you, they'll direct you where to go. So I always feel like reach out to a school counselor. Another one is if your child does receive help through special education, you have a case manager through that process. Typically, it's your child's learning center teacher. So that would be another communication that I would initiate. And then there's a whole other, as you can see from everyone up here, other people to reach out to, assistant principals, psychologists, social workers. Obviously, if it's a social emotional concern or things like that, you can always reach out to any of our support staff in that way. So yeah, there's a variety of people to go to, but I always, again, teacher number one, and then I would say school counselor number two.
I know when I was a school counselor, it was always a kind of a cute moment because they'd say, I don't want my teacher to know I'm struggling. And I was like, oh, honey, they teach you and they're grading you and they probably know that you're having a hard time. So, Mark, can you add a little bit? Because I know oftentimes we do have, students that want our help with, how to talk to a teacher, how to approach them when they're struggling, and maybe what some of that conversation looks like or some of the advice we might give.
Yeah, and to kind of echo what Christian was saying, ultimately we want the students to play as much a role in this as possible, but especially in the earlier grades, they often still need adult support. So that would be, as they said, a great time to see your counselor. And some of what we can do is I can kind of talk through some strategies or how and when to best approach your teacher. And knowing these teachers, as I work with them, I can sometimes give them some suggestions or advice on how to best approach that. And also what we can do too is, secretly behind the scenes, I can give the teacher a heads up that the student, is hoping to come see you, they're very nervous, and that way the teacher is expecting that, and they can kind of help make that initial contact a successful one. And so, in some of those conversations with the students, we'll talk through, what do you think you're going to say first? And then maybe you can kind of role play, what the teacher might say back, and then what would you say if the teacher said this? So that can kind of help them practice for that, interaction when they eventually go and reach out to the teacher.
So I have 2 kids in college. When they were in high school, on occasion, they would come home frustrated about an interaction or an expectation of a teacher. So hopefully it's a rare occurrence, but when that happens, what might we advise when the student comes home and is frustrated about something that happened in class?
So again, this is definitely going to happen to your student at some point during their high school career. Oftentimes it's the teacher that may be a little off, or the student is a little off, and so I think the best advice I can give is that when your student does come home and has that venting session about the AP chemistry teacher, that you listen to the student and you acknowledge the feelings that the student is having, and ask any questions you can about the situation and what was happening prior to, and really sort of lending that ear and lending that support for the student to acknowledge that their feelings are real and that they felt frustrated in the classroom. I think it becomes a bigger issue if it's something that's happening repetitively with the same teacher over and over and over again. And I think not to go back to who you can reach out to, there are plenty of people that can help support you in terms of managing those conversations, and ultimately, if it is a problem between the teacher and the student, you have a wide range of support to help to work out those issues and to figure out exactly what's happening to cause that frustration on the student's behalf.
And I would tag on, again, as somebody who did this right a couple of times and certainly did it wrong a few times. I think when you have a child who's upset, it's very easy as a parent to jump right into the pool of despair with them and get frustrated and get irritated and get annoyed. And I would just encourage you to try and resist that, because it probably in that moment doesn't make it much better. So really, if you want to have an adult-to-adult conversation, you're always welcome to reach out to the teachers and just say, listen, it sounds like it was a tough day with my son. I just was hoping to understand a little bit more about what happened so I can help to support things at home. And certainly the teacher always is the first line, but then the department chairs work closely with the teachers as well if you feel like you need additional support after those conversations. Anything else anybody would tack on to that important question? Okay. So if a family is concerned about their child's social interactions, who can they call at school?
So, as always, the school counselors, they have a bunch of, every kid in the school has a school counselor. So that would be probably the first line of defense when it comes to this, because it could be as easy of the school counselor having a talk and getting your kid into clubs, getting them more involved in kind of extracurriculars. That's definitely one of the good ways to be able to meet other students. If it is more than that, we can get a team together and figure out if they need to see me or if they need to see one of the psychologists, and kind of move forward with that. APs as well is a good contact to have, but that's kind of where it all starts in my eyes.
And I would say that sometimes, as a parent, it may be hard to figure out what's normative and what's expected. And so even just bouncing off ideas and having that conversation and figuring out, as a parent, are there other ways that you can support your child? We're definitely available for that as well. Encouraging the students that if they need extra support, we are here for them, as well as just reminding parents that we're here for you as well.
Okay, so this is one that we hear a lot. How do families know when a student is ready to pursue honors or AP level classes, and is there such thing as too many?
I can talk to the first part of that. I think in terms of knowing if your student is ready to pursue an upper level honors or AP course, the best indicator is prior academic achievement and how well they've done in the classes that lead up to that particular choice. Some of the other things that I question a student who comes to my office and says, I want to move from, say, our academic 300 level class to a 400 or AP level class, is are you engaged in that content area? Are you passionate about science? Because if you are passionate about science, you're more likely to enjoy that extra workload and more likely to be willing to put in the extra time and effort that you're going to need to sort of hit the ground running in an upper level course. A couple of things that I may not know about the student that you as parents may be privy to is how well does that student work independently? How often are you reminding the student to get the homework done prior to taking that upper level class? Do they need that push, or are they independently getting their homework done? Or are they independently going above and beyond and looking for other challenges within that subject area? And then we talk and we'll talk a little bit more about balance, but what does the rest of their schedule look like? If we sort of talk about math science kids versus humanities kids, and are they heavy on the humanities APs and honors level classes and they're trying to add science, or is this the one class that they want to take as an honors level class? And so there's a variety of things that will go into a student being successful, but I think for me it's a passion for the subject and interest in that subject, and that's really going to be the key to being successful, especially when the added work is seen in terms of independence.
Yeah, and this is a conversation that often happens in February when we're doing course selections for the following year. Another great resource is always the teacher, because by that point in the year, the student has had a half a year with the student has had a half a year with the teacher, so they know them as a learner in that classroom. They also know the expectations of that 400 level class. The goal is to find an appropriately challenging schedule without crossing that line, because you don't ever want someone to be overwhelmed. The tough thing is we don't know exactly where that is. So we of course want to take into consideration that subject area, but also, as Christian mentioned, overall, what else do they have on their plates? Do they have a lot of extracurricular activities that might keep them busy? So that's something that will often come up in a conversation with the student, with their counselor. The other thing to consider too is not all students need to take a 400 level class. Our 300 level classes are all college prep and very rigorous. So sometimes students might feel pressured to because a friend or a classmate is taking so many 400 level classes. It really is up to each individual student to find that line. And the other thing you want to consider too is you don't ever want to take too big of a leap, meaning going from maybe 0 400 level classes to 5 the next year. That'd be a lot to take on. So maybe consider doing 1 or 2 additional the following year to kind of slowly ramp it up, because you wouldn't want the student, even if they were capable in each of those classes, the overall workload might be too much. So that's certainly something to consider as well.
And I would just tack on to that to say, if you always follow the love, like if you think about something that you really kind of dread doing, and now I'm telling you that you have to do it more frequently, more intensely, for more time during your day, like it's just not a good recipe. Like I hate doing dishes. I'd rather do 5 dishes than 200 dishes. I had a student come to me and say, I'm going to take AP Lit, but I really hate reading and writing. I'm like, please don't do that. And balance, eating, breathing, and sleeping. We don't want high school to be a nasty blur. We don't want them just focused on the next step. We want them to be able to enjoy this. And if eating, breathing, and sleeping is not happening, nothing is getting done well. And so again, I would just caution the balance there. I've never in 22 years had a college say to me, well, if they just taken just one more AP, like it's never a matter of one more AP. And then also considering the cumulative effects. If some of these classes have 1 to 2 hours of work and they're taking 3 to 4 to 5 and they're not getting home from sports until 6 or 7 and they need to eat and breathe and sleep, just adding up the hours is just not the hours in the day. So I would we have students that can be successful in each individual's courses, but when you look at the cumulative effect, it really can become too much for most kids. And when in doubt, please chat it through with the counselor, call them, that's what they're there for. Where should we pull back? Where should we create the balance? We're always happy to have those conversations. right into how do we help students to sustain that balance between their academics, their extracurriculars, and all their other passion projects outside of school?
I mean, I think it really starts with a conversation with the student themselves, why they're interested in each of these things, because being the school social worker, there's definitely a lot of conversations that go on about a kid putting on a little too much onto their plate, and trying to figure out with that student what are the important things, what are needed, stuff like that, what are you actually enjoying, and what are you doing because you think you have to, right? So being able to try and talk them through what they can scale back, what they can actually, relieve some anxiety that way so they can actually enjoy the things that they're doing after school. And they actually have enough time for all the homework and everything coming in with the 400 level classes and everything like that. Because yeah, I feel like a lot of kids put a little too much on their plate and need to bring it back and realize that they're allowed to bring it back.
I would say along the same lines as that, just really making sure that self-care is in fact a priority. I know that that's hard for a lot of our students because they are so dedicated to their studies, but in fact, when you really make sure that you're taking care of yourself as a whole person, that will help you in that area as well. And I think that sometimes it can be hard for students to understand that, but it is extremely important.
Yeah, I would say too, in my former role as a school counselor, whenever I would go visit colleges or speak to students that were in college, a common theme that came up that I heard several times, and this is from kids that were even in the most highly competitive schools to get into, of what was the one thing that was the most important aspect of their high school lives that helped them be successful in college. It wasn't necessarily the AP chemistry class or the Calc BC or playing the cello or whatever it was. It was that their parents let them mess up at some point, especially when it came to their schedule. That there was some ownership that was built in, maybe not as ninth graders, but gradually as they progressed through all 4 years, and that they had to learn how to manage everything because when they go to college, you're not there with them. And so it was doing that gradual progression throughout 4 years that I heard several times from students in college that they said that was the thing that helped them the most to be successful in college, was letting their parents, having their parents basically let them mess up at some point with the safety net, obviously, but letting them have some challenges and having to overcome it on their own.
And I would tack on to Clorinda's point about self-care because it's such a critical one, and encourage that you ask your children how they take care of themselves, like what their self-care strategy is. Like if you're feeling overwhelmed or stressed out, what do you do to alleviate that? I think it might surprise you that a lot of students don't know how to answer that question. And if they don't know how to answer the question, they don't know how to do it in the moment that they need it most. And so in a calmer moment, having a conversation with them, like when you're feeling really stressed out, what is it that you do? Or helping them to develop some ideas. Well, you really love to run. That might be something that you do. Or I know that you love that band that's out. Like let's get their new album so you can listen to it or whatever it is. And I'd also encourage modeling your own self-care. I think sometimes as parents we're reluctant to say that we've had a hard day or say that we need to take a break. And again, things I've done well and not so well in my own parenting, but I found it was really powerful with my own kids to be able to come home and say, today was really hard, so I'm gonna go work out for like a half an hour because I know that's gonna help me feel better. So even just verbalizing, and modeling for your, like, this was hard, so I'm gonna do this to take care of myself, and just modeling that we all do that, even when we look like we've got it all together, I found to be really powerful with kids. Okay, so we're going to turn to a little bit of a harder conversation, and I should have mentioned at the beginning, Joyce Sixsmith is unable to join us today, but she's our connections counselor. So she has an expertise in substance use and abuse. She's here most days, but she sees kids that she has relationships with for general counseling as well. She also runs Blue Wave Counsel, which is substance-free a group that is choosing to live substance-free, so that's a really great group. But if you are suspecting that your child is using substances, I know sometimes there's a reluctance to involve the school, but we really do have some wonderful resources. So if we could speak to how a family should proceed in involving the school if they suspect their child might have a substance abuse issue.
Yeah, so as I think you've heard before, when in doubt, I think always feel free to start off with the counselor. However, sometimes families might think, well, that person's going to be writing the letter of recommendation to college. I don't want to let them know that my child is flawed. Don't ever worry that that's going to be the case. You know, we're here. Our most important role is to be here to help your student, to advocate for your student. But we would never want a family to not reach out to us because, oh my gosh, she's going to be writing that letter of recommendation down the road for college. And if anything, that might give us something to write about. We know all students are going to face difficult decisions and challenges, and we might be able to talk about their ability to overcome difficult situations. So if anything, that might show us, you know, some qualities of a child that we would want to write about, being able to advocate for a friend or get through a difficult situation. But, you know, again, certainly the first good phone call could be to the counselor, but as Megan mentioned, we have a wide variety of staff here who would be equipped to handle that as well. If anyone else wants to.
Okay, covered. And we know good kids make bad decisions all the time. So if a student is found under the influence at a game or at another school-sponsored event, what happens?
Well, they're going to get in trouble. But usually worse at home than at school, quite frankly. But the initial thing is we want to make sure kids are safe. So unfortunately, we have had the experience of having students that have been under the influence, whether here at school or at extracurricular activities, let's say at a sporting event or a dance or something like that. So the very first thing is we want to make sure they're safe. We want to make sure that parents are aware of what's going on. So there'll be some type of phone call home to come and get your child. If there are medical personnel around, we usually will have that person evaluate the child. So whether it's our school nurses or, again, if it's an after-school type thing, let's say at a sporting event, we have other medical people there too. So we try to evaluate them and make sure they're safe and make contact with you immediately, and usually to come and pick up your child. And we try to do this as discreetly as possible so that there's no embarrassment or anything like that to the student that made the bad choice. From there, after things settle down initially, there is some type of follow-up that happens afterwards, and that's typically a meeting with your son or daughter and yourself and an assistant principal and possibly some other people that work on that student's team, whether it's the school counselor or case manager or psychologist, things like that, and we talk about next steps. What we have found is that very often is the case, a student that makes that type of poor decision has something else going on. And that's why we try to include some of our support staff, like our school psychologists or Joyce Sixsmith, as Megan mentioned before, for additional follow-up afterwards, whether it's through counseling or referrals to parents or things like that. And there's obviously the conversation at that point too about the consequences that will come associated with that, which is obviously there as a deterrent. But our focus is to make sure that the kid's okay, that the parents have the resources that are needed. If there really is a bigger issue that we're just coming to light and realizing, and that's where someone like Joyce can be very helpful. And truth be told, there are times that we have to involve our school resource officer, Brian Wallman, who's not here today. And again, the police are there as a resource also, and is there to help when needed.
Awesome. And then just bouncing back to the academic side, after they've taken all that good advice and talked to the teacher, and if there are still unanswered questions or concerns after speaking with the teacher, who is the next person to call?
So I think it really depends on where those unanswered concerns lie. So I think Paul did a really nice job at sort of laying out the direction that you might go if there was an initial concern. If it's an academic or content area concern, that you can certainly reach out to one of the department chairs and we can help facilitate a meeting to address those concerns in the classroom. If your student has access to student services, it may be the case manager to be that first line of defense in terms of trying to facilitate that clarification or solution to those problems. If it's a social emotional concern, the school counselor may be the right spot to sort of start with that. With that process and trying to figure out how to best support the student. So I think no matter what is the issue, any one of those starting points can sort of get you moving in the right direction. So whether or not it's starting with the school counselor, and the school counselor may say, this sounds like a department chair issue and reach out to me, or this sounds like a social worker issue. Let's meet and talk about whatever is happening. But I think that there's plenty of resources and support, and gives you a good starting point to get that issue solved.
Great. And we know that families can be complex sometimes, so if there's an issue that's arising in the family that's impacting the child, particularly here at school, I know we've talked about like who they can call, but what kinds of supports might we be able to offer or resources?
I can jump in. So I think we can definitely, start. One of the 3 go-to places might be the school counselor, school psychologist, social worker, and just trying to navigate what's happening and figuring out who is the right person to support your student in that moment. Or maybe it's just that you as a parent need support. But I think always, if there's something going on at home, again, that's likely impacting the student here, and we would want to be aware to figure out how to support them and to navigate difficult conversations. If it's that there's so much stress that they're not able to get an assignment done, how do we work with the student? So I think that any one of us could be a great resource in starting that. And there was something else I was going to say about that, and it escaped me.
Well, let Sam jump in, and maybe come back to your mind.
And then, off of that, you can also, with our support, we can refer the family to outside therapy, counseling, whatever is needed to help out the family unit, which would also help out the child with school and those outside stressors. So that would be a good piece as well.
And I remembered what I was going to say.
Oh, there you go, came back.
That, unfortunately life happens, and sometimes there are losses outside that affect the student, but even, giving us a heads up, letting your student know that we're here, or if they feel like they could use the support, we can just do a quick check-in with them so that they know that we are here and they have a face that's attached to a name.
And also, while of course we want to make sure that the family's getting the support they need, sometimes it can be helpful to let the teachers know. So if it was ever something that you were comfortable sharing, even if it's just in a very vague way, you can reach out to the counselor, and we'd be happy to reach out to the teachers saying the student may be going through a tough time right now, so if they aren't themselves in class or maybe are struggling on something, this is just kind of worth knowing, so that can also help on that end.
That's a really key piece too, I think, and again, super general, we don't have to share specifics in most cases, but just so the teachers, if they're drifting out the window or they're not turning in their assignments, they can really, be more patient and gentle, and really just, work with the counselor to make sure they're supporting the student. So we're not trying to invade your privacy or anything, but we really are just trying to make sure that that child has the space to manage a difficult situation outside of school, and we're giving them the TLC and loving care they need here. And then, Paul, I think this one's going to you. What is JRB, and is it beneficial?
What is JRB? So JRB is the Juvenile Review Board here in Darien. There are a number of communities that have a similar board or process. So basically, JRB is an alternative for underage students who get into legal trouble. That is a way to avoid having to go to court and having a record of that infraction. So there are certain things that qualify for a student for JRB. Obviously not every infraction can be covered under that, but there are definitely some that are considered, I think, some people might say a little bit more minor, that a student can go through that. So the people that actually serve on JRB are a combination of people that work in law enforcement here in town, the school, and other community members that work within here that typically have experience working with kids and trying to help kids. Typically what will happen is the family and the student will be given the option after they are arrested of either going through the JRB process or going to court. Through JRB, typically what happens is we listen to the case and what happened and how the student is feeling about it now. The board determines whether or not to take on the case, in which case we usually lay out some parameters for the student to try to learn a little bit from what their experience was, but also to have some type of consequence also. And typically that might be like community service or things like that that comes associated with it. After a period of time, the student comes back, meets with the board, and at that point, if they've met all the parameters, then their record would be, the offense would be eliminated from their record. Is it successful? I mean, I have found many examples where it has been highly successful, where students have gone through the process, have learned a lot, have built relationships working with the police, and have avoided making similar bad choices down the road, and have kind of avoided that part of their life after that. So I find it highly effective. It's totally voluntary. No one is required to do it. But again, it is a way to avoid having to go through the legal system and potentially having that offense on the student's record. And when I say record, I mean, outside of school. I'm not saying academic record. I'm saying legal record, I guess. So I am a big proponent for our JRB.
Okay, so we covered a lot, and I want to thank my colleagues for their expertise, and I hope what you're going to walk away from is that there are just so many people here with such commitment and such incredible talent and such a love for helping kids and families that really call any one of us is really the bottom line answer, and we'll get you where you need to be so that we can help to support your child and your family. So I think we have a few minutes for questions and answers. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they'll find a way around it anyway. They can find a way around anything we put into place, yeah? Yes, I know. Yeah. Yeah, and I think we could probably spend a long time talking about it was a lot of discussion, as you can imagine, the decision. And I think, and Paul, feel free to jump in on this, but even when the students had their school-issued iPads, when they get to high school, and even on their school-issued iPads, I think that they had access to their email and even maybe the messenger. And so some of it is we need to grow the skills to help them to be able to have a device and get their work done, right? I mean, I have one device and I can get distracted as well. And so I mean, we're happy to discuss a little bit about maybe offline, the decision-making, but I think we were finding that a lot of students had a device that they preferred that worked, some of them, the iPad was perfect for them. For others, there was a device that worked better for their academics or their typing or the functions that they wanted on their device. And so if there's a student who's struggling with that balance, especially ninth graders, which is a little bit of a full boat in terms of not getting distracted and organization and time management, the counselors are happy to help with that as well in terms of, I can't tell you how many kids I've sat with and been like, okay, you get home at 4 o'clock. From 4 to 4:30, you're gonna have a snack. From 4:30 to 5 o'clock, you're gonna do homework, and like kind of developing like a structure and a schedule, because it is a skill that they're gonna have to learn to develop. In just a few short years, none of us are gonna be sitting there monitoring anything. So I don't know if there's anything else anybody wanted to add to it about the BYOD, but yes. So the question is, because of mental health, are we not giving homework over school breaks? And does that also include AP classes? Was that the second part of your question?
So yeah, I try and remember, I don't know if it's over every break, but there is definitely an emphasis this year on trying to identify certain periods of time where we're asking for staff not to give any type of work, so that it gives an opportunity for students to decompress, spend time with their family, and take a break. So there definitely are some instances, whether it's long weekends or over certain holidays, that we are asking for staff not to do that. Or not to, when you come back from Christmas break and there's a test on that first day, like stuff like that. We're definitely trying to avoid that for everyone's well-being.
Yes.
Yes, that would include AP classes as well.
No, sophomore. Yep. Good question. So that could be discussed at any time, right? And not even for students, for adults and people in general. We do that with the sophomores because I think that's when we had the most time, because there are a lot of, depending on the grade, we have a lot of things we have to cover and really want to cover. And we found that we had the most time with sophomores because they really don't have a ton of things going on, like big events as far as the sophomore year. But it's actually not a bad thing to consider. Every year we review what we discuss with the students before we do it. That's something that's a fair point to bring up to.
I just want to say I appreciate you guys so much, and I think all of us parents really feel this way. We're here to help you too, and we want to help. So if you feel like we need to know stuff, we love knowing. Thank you for everything you guys do.
And thank you for your support.
One of my favorite segments of the freshman guidance seminar is we have the seniors come in and talk to them. So one of the lessons is the seniors come in and sort of what I wish I had known when I was sitting there. And oftentimes that comes up. There's oftentimes that they talk about different ways that they, social media, their social media presence, their professional email addresses. We talk about how to write a professional email, which is a hilarious lesson, by the way. It's really quite funny. Capitalizing, not saying things like, IDK, like how to, not addressing the teacher by their first name, things like that. So, so we do a lot. We even do email etiquette, and the seniors give some really good perspective that, of course, means a lot more to the students than anything that we're going to say. So, any other questions? No, we covered it all?
Well,
amazing.
Sam had to get called for something, but the four of us will be down here for a few minutes too if you have questions that you just didn't want to share with the group and would rather approach one of us individually, where we'll be available down here too for a little while.
Call us, email us, make appointments. We love to partner with parents. That's why we're here. Just let us know whatever your family and your students need. We can fix almost anything if we know about it. All right. Thank you all so much.